Hey everyone, Jordan here. Today is the launch of the new AMD RX 9060 and 9060 XT. They're also going to be available in two different models, an 8 and a 16 gig. I am looking at the 16GB XT today. This is specifically the Gigabyte Gaming OC that they've kindly sent over. I'll put the main specs of the 9060 and the 9060 XT on the screen for you to see today. Now the baseline prices for these cards, the MSRP ones, are going to be $299 for an 8 gig and $349 for a 16. Highly recommend a 16, especially in 2025. You may see some VRAM issues if you get an 8. Maybe you think, oh, there's a new game that's coming out and you download that and you run into VRAM issues. So yeah, definitely get a 16 if you are looking at this card. Now this is the gaming OC, so that means we have a factory overclock. So we will see a little bit of a price bump on this card in comparison to the 299 and the 349 that I mentioned. But I am filming this a bit earlier, so hopefully in the conclusion that I'll be filming tomorrow, I'll have a price of this one for you. So as I get this out of the box, let's go over some other key specs. We're going to have a game clock of 2620 megahertz and a boost of 3230, 2048 stream processors. One big thing we're going to see on this model is we're going to have Gen 5 support for our PCI rather than the Gen 4 X8 that we saw on the previous 7060. And here we have the gaming OC. Quite a nice little stealthy design. We've got a few pills that we need to do, so let's go ahead and do them. There we go, one little one on the top. There we go. It's got a triple fan design on this card. They're about 75mm. Got two going anti-clockwise and then one that's going clockwise. We've also got some nice texture below those fans there to break it up a little bit from what we generally see. Other things, we've got 16GB of GDDR6 on this, and then that's running at 192-bit. Let's get a bit of a closer look so you can see all those heat pipes and that big old heatsink running the whole length. Looks like we've got 4 heat pipes coming through there. There's also a cutout on the back plate as well, so that we can get some heat dissipation there from the fan on the other side. Simple gunmetal and black design on this card, but like I said, it does look quite stealthy. And on the top of this, we have got a little part that slides across, so we have either the Gigabyte lights up or you can slide that down to then have a little bit of lighting on the card itself. We'll look at that closer when we've got it in the case. Above that, we've got our trusty 8-pin PCI connection. No dodgy cables to be found on this card, which is a great thing to see. Nothing much to talk about on the end, just got some Game On branding there. Then on the opposite end, we have our display options. We've got 2 display ports. These are going to be 2.1, and then on the end, we've got an HDMI. It's going to be 2.1B. So of course, there are 3 monitor support. You can do up to 8K, so 7680 by 4320. Recommended power supply for this is going to be 650, so fairly low. That's why I thought about the small form factor budget build might work quite well in that. Something we could look at doing as well. But now let's get into the test system. I'll show you the lighting. We'll get the all-important performance charts, stick it in and see where it lands in the other cards that I've tested recently. Then I'll give you my overall thoughts. It's time to give you some numbers and my thoughts on the card. As you can see, the RGB is now going. Here's what it looks like with and without the little plate across. So you can see the differences. It's a little bit dimmer when it's slid over, so you might like that setting if you plan to go at night, or maybe you're in a dimmer room. So done some testing. It's taken a little longer than planned, as I originally just tested this card, but then I thought I'd add in the Acer 7600. Then after writing the conclusion, I remembered that I had the 7600 XT from the scan bundle, so we could test that too. The extra time is obviously going to be worth it because then we've got a bigger sample size and some more affordable cards in the charts. Plus the 7600 XT is great to have in there as we can see the direct generational improvements. So I've gone with 1440p with a little 4K for this video, but we can always look at some 1080p when I use this in the build, which will hopefully be very soon. The test system is going to be an Intel 12900K on Asus Z690 Hero. There's 32GB of Kingston Beast DDR5 at 5600 megatransfers per second. The boot drive is a Seagate Firecooler 530 1TB. Cooling is a Corsair H170 Elite LCD. We've got a 1300 watt EVGA power supply and it's all in the Phanteks Etho 2 case. Now we do want to stress that although you could test on a newer system, this one's purely to eliminate any bottlenecks and that's it. I do get comments but people saying why don't you use this speed RAM or an X3D CPU, which is okay for those of you that actually own those parts, but it will give unrealistic results for those that don't. So this sets a nice baseline, and then obviously anything you add to your system that could help, be it faster RAM and overclock, AMD smart memory for example, is then going to be a bonus to your FPS. So first up, we've got 3D Mark II tests you can download and test for yourself if you want to do a little bit of comparison. There's Time Spy and then still Nomad. There are substantial jumps in performance over the previous gen, with this stepping on the 4070 Founders Edition, which I thought was quite surprising. That was £600 at launch, and if you buy it new, it's still over $450 now. Moving into the suite of games, we're going to roll through these. You can obviously pause and look in depth if you'd like to. Minus Crisis and Shadow of the Tomb Raider, which usually perform better on Nvidia cards, the generational jump continues here with another substantial jump from the 7600 XT to the 9060, getting you into the realm of a high refresh rate monitor, even using high settings. Now the only exception to this is Starfield, and much like Cyberpunk that we'll get to in a minute, it's a very intensive title. However, that does offer FSR, and I would recommend you stick it on if you do plan to play that. Now there are a few titles where the 1% low takes a little bit of a hit. Nothing drastic or anything to write home about. We do see some low 1% on Dirt 5, but that's across the board. I always see that with that title, and even uninstalling and reinstalling doesn't fix it. So we'll be looking into that, but with that sample size across the board, it's certainly the title and not the hardware. Now Far Cry 6 is going to be an AMD favouring title, but the game performance is lovely and smooth. It also outperforms the 4070 for the first time, but you could put that down to the AMD bias. On to the most intensive title, Cyberpunk. The 9060 XT again is hot on the heels of the 4070 and can keep up even when switching into ray tracing, even though this is a title where you'd certainly want some FSR to bump those frames up. Now speaking of, adding FSR 3 and frame gen adds a nice jump to around 195 frames average, where it matches the 4070 again. Even in ray tracing, it's getting over 3 figures, which is great to see. Now unfortunately, I didn't get any results with the 8GB 7600X for the last 2 tests. It just kept constantly crashing, so I gave it a DNF for that one, unfortunately. Now in terms of 4K, the 9060 XT did struggle. This isn't a card for 4K at this price point. That's something that you can look at with the 9070 XT though, especially with FSR 3. I have reviewed that card as well, and I'll put a link on the screen if you want to check that out. Now I would have also liked to add the Intel Arc B850 into the tests. Just can't seem to get my hands on one though, but maybe in the future that's something we can look at. And also, if you're wondering about this versus the 5060, I recommend you watch Jay's 2 cents video. They've got a more dedicated comparison in that one. Now for wattage from the wall, even though it's using a single 8-pin over 2 that we saw on the previous gen, it is pulling more than the 4070, but I'll be happy with that given that the numbers it spits out, especially as it's coming in a lot cheaper. Now for the thermals and fans, the card was on the warmer side with a maximum temp of 85. However, it also was a warmer day. Removing the ambient gives us a delta of 42 degrees. So on the higher temperature, but nothing concerning as these cards are safe above that temperature anyway. It's certainly not the worst that I've seen either. Now I'm hoping to get AC for this room in the future so we can keep the room at a set temperature for more accurate data. The fans on this card though were quieter than expected. There was no notable jumps or ramps with the speed, which was great. I didn't notice any core whine during gaming either, which again is good. The only that I did notice was during the Menu of Crisis Remastered, a title that seems to bring it out in every card that I've ever tested. So yeah, nothing to worry about there. The build is okay. It's a little bit plasticky in areas. The backplate is metal though, which is nice. It is a budget card though, so it is to be expected. And of course, the key thing we're going to need to talk about is going to be the price for this. At the time of filming, it's available for £379 in the UK, which is $389. So that jump is really quite small. There's no massive change in currency, which is good. It's going to be around $30 to $40 or pounds above the MSRP of this card, so the 349 I mentioned at the start. That's pretty typical for a factory overclock model though. There isn't too much extra for a card that's also readily available too. Now you can get the 8GB model with this card for $319, so 60 less, which is quite a chunk cheaper. However, if you are looking to keep this for several years and looking to play some more intensive titles, I think it's worth forking out the extra in the first place to avoid any dreaded VRAM issues. But overall, I think the 9060 XT is a nice little addition to the stack, especially at this price point with such a jump in performance over the previous gen. If there's anything else you'd like to know that I haven't covered, of course, leave a comment down and below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. I will mention I'm hoping to do a budget build with this card, and we could also try some maybe 1080p or some other things that I haven't covered in this one if you'd like to see them. So let me know down below and get subscribed and ding the bell so you don't miss when that video goes live. I'll leave the link to this in the description box below if you want to pick one up or learn more. Thank you all for watching. I hope you have enjoyed it. Thank you to Gigabyte for sending this out for me to look at, and I'll see you all in the next one.